Okay, cool. All right, so today the purpose of this conversation is to chat more about our limitations around food. So what's coming up for us essentially that is a hindrance, if you will, for us being more successful or maybe even just feeling better about our situations around food. So what we're going to talk about today is how limitations have the power to more or less stop you in your tracks, right? Depending on what you're doing, limitations can be super powerful and maybe even derail our efforts here and there. So identifying the roots of the limitations may allow us to proceed from a place of optimism and abundance as opposed to from fear or worry. And I imagine as we keep chatting here, this will become clearer, but just kind of keep this in mind, right? Where are the troubles coming up for you in connection with your food? I'm going to share some examples that I hear from people frequently and also some potential solutions, right? And the solutions are not necessarily one size fits all, as that's not real life. However, the solutions presented can remind us that there may be solutions that are effective for us, personalized and effective for us. Okay, so looking closer at food-related challenges. So the feelings, realities, potential solutions surrounding these limitations are important to recognize and can allow us to make shifts moving forward. The goal, again, of this conversation is to give you the tools to help you feel more successful and better understand the areas where shifts or further exploration or learning may be helpful. So in thinking about this, I was trying to come up with some common food-related limitations that I hear from people, right? And these are just examples, and also I'm going to invite you to take some time to think about some that you may be experiencing, right? So some potential things that I hear are people aren't sure what to eat or how much, that we have a lack of time for food shopping or meal prepping or planning, right? That we are always feeling hungry, that it's difficult or we find that we can't restrict certain food groups, or it results in restricting and binging, right? Where we try to stop eating something for a period of time and then it ends up that we potentially overindulge in things after that. That you're aiming for results and you're not seeing progress, and that in itself is limiting. Do you experience stress eating? Do you experience times when the weekends get away from you, right? Again, these are just examples, but maybe jogging your thoughts as well to think about some things that maybe are coming up for you. This next section, I just want to talk about some possible solutions to those specific examples that I just gave, right? And again, this is not meant to be those cookie cutter type solutions. However, merely the reminder that there is a potential step that we might be able to take to allow ourselves to feel better about our situation. So, for example, if you're someone who maybe isn't sure what to eat or how much to eat, an approach could be reading more about appropriate caloric balance, or maybe consulting with a coach and asking for support. If you're someone who has a lack of time for food shopping or meal prepping or planning, right? Maybe it's something like you use a food ordering service, you know, like how like Amazon Prime has things, or Instacart or whatever, where you get the food delivered. So it's not necessarily that you're spending time going to the store. Potentially also it's booking time each week for you to plan your food. Or maybe it's even ordering food already prepared from a meal service, right? If you're someone who's always feeling hungry, you might understand that proteins and fats will help you feel fuller longer. And so gravitating more towards those than carbs or processed foods can help you feel better throughout the day. If you're someone who feels like they can't restrict certain food groups or have issues with restricting and binging, right? I have certainly been there, right? I've tried to give up sugar or give up processed foods and end up then just overindulging on them when I do start eating them again, right? And in reality, a potential suggestion to this would be, in my opinion, restricting is not the answer for most, right? However, putting reasonable guidelines around treats could be an option. Using pattern interrupt strategies where we pause ourselves before making choices around our food could be a potential strategy, right? But definitely not necessarily getting rid of everything altogether. Are you someone who's aiming for certain results and not necessarily seeing progress, right? That could be definitely tricky. We could reevaluate the processes that you are using. Are they effective for you? And then equally checking in on our consistency and accuracy. Sometimes when we actually step back and look at things, we realize that maybe we haven't been doing it as regularly as we thought we were, or our approach to different situations is maybe not as clear as we thought it was. And so kind of taking a step back could be beneficial. Are you someone who stress eats? We could work to address the stress at the root as opposed to letting it get to the point where we're feeling so upset that we're drawn to food as almost like a coping mechanism. And then again, are you someone where weekends go awry, right? One potential suggestion could be to stick to your typical food plan until about 2 or 3 p.m. on the weekends, and then allowing for some adventure or treats in the evening. And sometimes this approach can allow you to stick with as typical of a food plan as you're typically used to, and then still allowing for some indulgence later in the day. So again, those are not specific. This is just showing that there are possibilities to various limitations. Okay, so now how do we identify our personal limitations? And Sue, this might be just an opportunity to think about it, or certainly if you have some to share, we can definitely talk more about it. And anybody who listens to this moving forward, these might be appropriate questions to reflect on, right? The first one is, what are you currently limited by around your food and nutrition, if at all? And what challenges do you experience? Right, feel free to jump in if you want to, Sue. If we can identify things, yeah, please, go ahead.
So I'm definitely one of those people that always be hungry.
You froze. Oh no. Can you hear me, Sue? I'm sorry, you cut out. Can you repeat that last question?
I don't like being hungry, so I eat so that I'm not hungry anymore. Yeah. But I realized that, you know, the quantity that I was consuming was a lot more than the average person.
Okay. And what foods were you gravitating towards when you were trying to feel fuller, if you can recall?
Yep. So I do things like nuts when, you know, things are great, but also it would be, you know, granola bars. I'm definitely, I like, you know, I'm more so now trying to avoid processed foods, but you know, I would go for any kind of baked good, crackers, cookies if they were on hand, which we try not to too much. Currently I'll do in the afternoon, I'll grab some cheese, cheddar cheese. If we have crackers, I do mix it with the crackers, but lately I've more so hummus and carrots, that kind of stuff is what I'm grabbing now more, but before it was much broader range of foods.
Cool. Well, and this is a point I'm going to bring up actually in a minute, but what it sounds like to me is that you're already making steps towards better choices, which is wonderful, right? And I agree, feeling hungry is not desirable. And so certainly you want to prepare for that or have snacks available, right? So to your point, gravitating towards unprocessed whole foods is going to be a great place to start, and in the sense that, as you said, nuts are filling in the sense that they're fats. Fibers like carrots, hummus, those kinds of things are filling because they're slower digesting. The potential other thing to consider is protein sources, in the sense that those are also slow digesting. They can help support that feeling fuller, longer type feeling. And if it's possible, even to think about either having protein rich snacks available, which maybe is like, you know, fuller fat yogurt, it's beef jerky, it's tuna on crackers, it's tuna on a salad, you know, or having larger portions of protein with meals, that can even allow you to feel fuller for longer between meals.
Okay.
Is that avenue anything that you've thought about in terms of food choices yet?
Yes, it is. And I guess I was thinking that having almonds was a protein base, but
It does have
almonds,
protein in it, but definitely more of a fat source. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. So the almonds and cheese were what I was grabbing lately, but maybe I need to shift that a little bit more to get different sources of protein in there.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, those are still good choices, certainly healthy, beneficial choices. And I imagine you could also benefit from including, you know, maybe it's a turkey roll up, high quality deli meat that goes with the whole little mini charcuterie board snack that you're creating for yourself there. You know, something along those lines could be super helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
And I also just want to mention one other point in that you had said earlier that you eat a lot. I'm paraphrasing, but
Yep.
did you say something along those lines? Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, this is merely a reminder, if you will, that food intake experiences are completely different from one person to the next. So even if you eat more than a friend or a family member or whatever, that's not to say that it's unhealthy for you per se, right? Each of us have different caloric needs and different metabolic rates for that matter. And so how much I eat and how much you eat could look completely different, and we could look exactly the same or the opposite, right? Is I eat way more than you, but we look much different, right? And so just kind of keeping that in mind too, that like that food related comparison is something you can let yourself get away with, right? and not necessarily have to worry about how much it is compared to other people.
Right.
Certainly within our own selves, it's something to be mindful of, the amounts that we each consume, but more on a personal level. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
I shouldn't compare myself to others. It was something that brought some awareness to me and where I was at with my food consumption, that I've reduced.
Yeah. And have you noticed, I'm sorry, what?
My metabolism has changed.
As it does for all of us. Yeah. And have you noticed any changes since you've made any adjustments?
I did. So, well, one, I learned to work through some pains of being hungry. I was still eating, just not snacking as much or indulging in those processed foods, trying to make better choices, trying to increase my fruit and vegetable intake. And I surprised myself. I lost 4 pounds in January.
Awesome.
It's stable. It didn't change in February. But a year ago, when I had tried to cut down on some of what I was eating, I wasn't losing anything, even though I knew that I was changing things. So it's working better. But I know me, I need the knowledge to make the appropriate changes.
Great. Yeah.
So I've been listening to you.
Oh, thank you. And that was one of the things actually that I had brought up here is, and I imagine it might even be the next question here, but is, here it is, or never mind, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but regardless, is what information are you still in need of to better support yourself? And so, yeah, seeking out that information is huge. And before I jump to that though, is there anything else that you feel currently limited by around food, or what challenges do you experience around food? That anything that you'd want to talk out?
Yeah. So the challenge is around sugar. I've diagnosed myself with a sugar addiction. I love sugar. I love it. I crave it. And it's a stress eating part for me too.
Okay.
And I know that when things are stressful at home, I want chocolate.
Okay.
Chocolate. If we had pastry, which I don't buy because I would eat it all, those kinds of things. So, but I've definitely realized that it's when I'm stressed out
Mm,
I'm wanting that sugar. I'm wanting that intake.
mhm.
And so it's, the awareness is one thing, but then I need to figure out like next steps on
Great.
changing that craving.
Yeah, great. And to be honest with you, the awareness piece is huge, right? Once we deduce, oh, when I get stressed, this is what I do, and then I feel bad about it, right? And not to say that eating sweets is bad per se, but if it makes you feel a certain way, then it is potentially a negative impact. So once you notice it, we can start to think about what potential solution could we bring up, right? And just in listening to you, some pieces that you might consider, one is, are there other ways that you are comfortable with interacting with stress, right? Is it go for a walk? Is it, have a conversation that needs to be had? Is it write in a journal about what you're feeling? Is it exercise? Is it have a cup of tea? Like, what else is there available to interact with stress before we get to using food, right?
Right.
And then the other piece of it, and because again, I don't necessarily subscribe to the restriction train 100%, is, does it make sense to put a mindful limit on sweets, right?
Mhm.
I have 2 treats per day. I have 1 treat per day. I have 1 treat per week. Whatever makes sense for you and your goals. Sometimes when we put a small guide around it, it allows us to remove it from our process, right? So, for example, if you know that you have 1 treat per day and you're feeling stressed, you could say, oh, great, I'll have my thing right now. I'll have my piece of chocolate and then I'll move on with my day, right? Or equally, you're feeling stressed and you're like, well, I plan to have that piece of birthday cake at the party I'm going to later. So what else can I do right now to help my feeling currently, right? How do either of those pieces resonate with you?
It sounds good. I just need to figure out what can work in the moment, because it's usually
True.
revolves around life at home with 2 kids. So I can't
Fair.
just leave and go for a walk.
Oh no, I hear you. Yeah, certainly
love
there's
to.
extenuating circumstances here.
That
Yes.
would be great. That would work. Yeah, so I need to think about how I can get 5 minutes just to
Cool. Yeah.
do some mindfulness, write in a journal, do something.
So let me do this. I'm going to keep rolling through this.
Yep.
Listen at where you can, and then if you're still able to at the end, let's regroup and see if anything else came to mind from this. And then otherwise, we can regroup in the future and see if what other things are coming up for you, and maybe try some of these different strategies and then see how it's going. Right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, of course. So I appreciate you sharing a lot with your personal experiences around, food limits. And then anybody who's listening to this as well in the future, I invite you to think about ways that you're currently limited around food, what challenges you experience, and then trying to track it back. So even like how Sue was saying, is that the sugar thing is coming up, and when she tracked it back, she noticed it was a stress-related thing, at least sometimes, right? So then we could look at the stress piece, as we were just talking about. And that's just one example again. The next piece I want you to think about is, how important is adjusting this for you? And the reason I bring this up is, sometimes I think we have these outside influences making us believe that we should make certain adjustments, right? That you shouldn't eat dairy, or whatever crazy thing is out there at the moment. And so reflecting this back on you individually, how is this important to me right now, can help motivate and inspire you to make the changes if it's need to moving forward, or also offer yourself a perspective of, actually, I don't care that much about this thing, and maybe I'll leave it as a noticing for right now. Again, just an example and something to think about. The next question I want you to ask yourself is, what strategies are you currently using or attempting to use to support yourself with these pieces, and how are they working? This piece is important because if you're not currently using strategies, then great, that's a great place to start. If you are trying things and you're not seeing the results that you're looking to see, that's when we can go back to the drawing board or have further conversations about what we can adjust. This also offers that perspective around what am I actually doing to change this thing I feel limited by. Another question is, what information, structures, or help do you still need to feel successful? Right. So Sue was even mentioning a couple minutes ago about still seeking out the information that she needs to know to be able to better understand the choices she's making. So if you're feeling limited, take time to think, what else do I need to know and how else can I find that out to feel more successful in this situation? And then seeking out that support. And if you don't feel challenged around your food, awesome, congratulations. What are some strategies you will continue to use and allow yourself to feel successful? It's wonderful if you're not feeling challenged, really it is. And I still invite you to think about some of the strategies you're using in the sense that they can help remind you to continue using them, and also credit yourself for putting the pieces into place to get this support, right? And that's worth a little cheers for. Cool. So what is this whole conversation about? The first thing I want to bring up is this idea that better is better. This is one of my most favorite phrases. And the reason I like it is because it's a reminder that if you are doing something to move yourself closer to where you're trying to get to, that is a positive. Period. Sometimes I imagine we try to do too much at once, or we're removing all the sugar, for example, when in reality, if we went from having 5 treats a day to having 2 treats a day, that's better. And we can continue to adjust those metrics as we move forward. The other piece I want to remind you of is the whole point of this is to take our personal limitations, where are we in our own individual lives feeling limited or challenged, and creating places we can work in, right? So again, to go back to Sue's example, maybe about feeling hungry and being worried she's going to end up hungry. If she can take that as her personal situation and also include some protein, as we were talking about, that's creating a place where she feels more comfortable and she can work in, right? Merely an example. And then keep in mind too, this is all personalized and unique. Your process doesn't have to look like anybody else's, right? And equally, what food planning looks like for me might look different for you. Again, to go back for a second, when I brought up the idea of a walk to Sue and she said it's not necessarily possible to do that with her kids, of course, that's a personalized situation to her. So we would go back and have more conversation about how do we relieve stress without leaving the house, right? For example. Good. I found myself questioning this at the end of this presentation. Is this overly simplified? And to me, what this sounded like is, or could it sound like, is one person saying they're sad and someone else saying, don't be sad, as if it was that easy to just flip a switch, right? And it's not, and I hear you. I'm with you. I struggle with these things myself. This process will take time and potentially take some effort or planning on your part to better dive into those things that you're noticing. And here's my invitation, is to start small, keep that better is better piece in mind, and make it work for you and your lifestyle. Would it be helpful also to create a mantra, right? Something that reminds you of what you're working on. I enjoy treats sometimes. I eat to fuel my body. I prioritize my protein intake. I love my body, right? Anything that resonates with you that can remind yourself of why you're working on the things you're doing and why it's important to you is super helpful here. Another piece to consider is, what accountability pieces can you put in place for yourself right now? What progressive pieces will you add on in the future, right? So going back a second ago, I made that reference to, if you're someone who eats 5 treats a day, going to 2 treats a day is better. And that's an accountability piece because you put a number on it, right? And a progressive piece in the future might be bringing it down to 1 treat a day in the future. But we don't have to go from 5 to 0 right away. we can support ourselves in the process, think about what pieces of accountability we want to put in place that would most support us, and go with that, right? As another example here, I work with a lot of people who need reminders, right? So I suggested to someone last week to set a reminder on their phone to go off every day at noon to check in on their water intake. And essentially the reminder would come up and say, have you had X amount of water yet today? And if they have, great. And if they haven't, it's a great reminder halfway through the day to have a glass of water. Will that person need that reminder forever? No, and ideally no, and I wouldn't recommend having it forever. But for right now, it's accountability piece that they put in place to better support themselves, right? And the progressive next step might be removing the reminder down the line. And keep in mind as well, I promise, I'll not leave you high and dry on this if you need support. We're going to keep working on these pieces and approaches around food, as well as some actual food recommendations and logistics over the next couple of weeks. And I'm here for you beyond that as well. Okay, so that's what I have for today. If I could summarize, it would be start to notice where you are feeling challenges or limitations around your food. Think about how you can best support yourself with those in a progressive manner and put the pieces in place to help hold you accountable. Evaluate and reevaluate down the line to see if you need to make tweaks. And of all, keep in mind that better is better and that the process is your own. And I'm here for you if you need any support. So that is what I have for right now. I'm going to stop this recording and then